So into Revit, we're going to insert this image of the 4A6 drawing 4A6 that you can download off the Moodle page. And of course, the first thing we're going to want to do is to scale it. I'm going to use one of these dimensions along the right side of the drawing here, this 24-foot one. Select the drawing again, hit the scale button, click as close as you can to the hash. I'm going to zoom in here, see if I can't center it, and then type in 24 feet. You can see by default it comes in pretty darn close. So the structural grid that's in this building is really helpful for modeling it. Now, off of a construction document like this, obviously you're not going to have the precision of being able to align everything. So by laying in the structural grid, you're going to have things that you can use, devices that you can use to kind of snap to as we go to construct it. So what we want to start with here is, by defining the structural grid, is here under the Architecture tab. There's a grid button up on the top right. So what you can see is that these start at 4.8, which is a funny kind of anomaly. This lower floor doesn't include the gallery or the office spaces off to the end. You can see how the salon is basically the finish. I think that's all that fit on the drawing at whatever scale this was at, 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. Everything drawn by hand on Mylar back then. So we're going from 5 up to 18 across the bottom for the structural grid, and from, well, A prime, which comes out into the pit, if you will, and A up through H, again up through the lab spaces. Interesting to see some of the old school stuff that was in the building back in the day. Universal structural testing machines, the labs were quite different. Anyway, it's a fun drawing to look through if you want to take the time. So using this, using the structural grid component, I'm going to zoom in here and get as close as I can onto the line that represents number 5. And then come all the way up, and I'm going to go off the drawing with it. First thing I want to do is actually adjust what number this is. I'm going to do it with number 5. Revit's quite smart about these things, and so if you label things correctly from the beginning, they tend to follow your lead as you go across. So I'm going to array. I see. I'm going to array number 5 on this grid, and I can see down here it's an 18-foot grid. Going all the way to number 16 across the sheet. So I'm just going to pull this out and snap it to 18 feet, and I want 12 of these in total. I can also put the 12 in here when it prompts me to. It's going to take me all the way across over to 16, and I need a couple of more to get to 17 and 18. 17 is 24 feet, and 18 is 16 feet. Going through the labs and through 290. I'm just going to use the copy command rather than the array again. So again, this first one is 17, and the next one is 16. Excuse me, 16 feet is 24. All right. The 17th grid line is 24 feet from number 16, and the 18th grid line is 16 feet from number 17. That's way too confusing. Look at the drawing, and I'm sure you'll figure it out. All right, now let's start with A, going the other direction. So I'm going to hit the grid button again and come across this way. Oh, I do want to be more precise than that. I'll zoom in here, especially with this first one, because everything's going to be based off of it. You can see by default it went to number 19. I'm going to take it all the way across. And again, change the name to the letter A. And from this, the Revit should start to infer what we want to do. There's a lot more kind of diversity in the spacing going in this direction, so I'm just going to use the copy tool. First one is 12 feet to B. You can see how it figured out to go to B. And going to C is 24 feet. You can see how the width of the salon is 48 feet. And D is 24 feet. 14 feet, no, excuse me, 28 in order to get to E. 4 feet to F. $28 feet to G. Not going to worry about the small one. And H is 40 feet, the depth of the lab spaces. Okay, so again, the drawing isn't going to align perfectly with the column grid that we've laid out, but the column grid is precise, so you can use the drawing underlay as sort of a guide, but in essence, we're going to want to snap everything that we do to the grid line and not to the drawing. You're never going to have the precision you want with the drawing. I'm moving over here to the right side where there's a bunch of dimensions that I can use to start figuring out some of the office spaces. So the first thing that we want to notice is the two wall types that we're going to start using today, which is wall type number 2 and wall type 11A. So these little dashes with the cut and then the diamond at the end are drawing indicators, old school drawing indicators of the wall type that's at any given location. So for those of you that are observant, you'll notice that number 2 are 8-inch CMUs and that 11A are metal studs with gypsum wallboard. But you can also go to the architectural select sheets that are also on here. I'm going to open up one that I've already downloaded. And I'm going to go to page number 9, where some of these wall types are defined. And up here on the left side, on the right side, you're going to see some of these wall types. Now they're inevitably a bit pixelated from the scans, but here you can see that wall type 2 is exactly what I said, an 8-inch nominal CMU wall type. It's actually 7 5/8 inch wide. And then if I scroll down to wall type 11A, down here we see this is a 6-inch metal stud, 1/4-inch galvanized 6-inch metal stud, 16 inches on center, with 5/8 inch of gypboard on each side. The total width of this wall is 7 1/4 inches wide. 8 inches nominal again to match again Gwathmey's obsession with the 8-inch wall module. So this one we're going to have to create. The other one is relatively off the shelf. So back to Revit. When we go to make a wall, basically a series of options in the property dialog box come up here. We're working on level 1. Hopefully you brought this floor plan into level 1. The top constraint for this wall is going to be level 2. So we want the walls to go up to level 2. Sorry, so working down the left side here, you can see the top constraint defines what the wall is going to go to, and if you were to change the level height, everything is going to adjust to accommodate that change. The big thing that I want everyone to pay attention to too is the location line, which is either defined here in the properties or up here along the Modify tab. All of these settings can be defined up here. And in fact, you can offset them from certain other objects as well. Is whether or not you're going to use the center line. So the center line for some of these walls, you can see for the office walls, is going to be important. But for others, it's about the edge dimension that's on this grid, this kind of orangish grid that you see across the drawing. So in different instances, you're going to want to draw the walls to hit different kinds of edges. Okay, so first things first, we need to make these two different wall types. So wall type 2, which is the CMU 8-inch wall, and wall type 11A, which is the 6-inch metal stud with 5/8 inch gyp. So this big button, this is a button at the top of the properties window, is where you can go in to adjust and to select different wall types, and you can bring others in. but there are a few here that you can kind of start with. So I'm going to select an 8-inch masonry wall because that's basically what we're doing. But I'm going to hit Edit Type here because I want to adjust it slightly. And almost every time you open a wall type, you're going to want to duplicate the name of it. So duplicating the name of anything that you make, really, whether it's a material or anything new, anything that breaks free from these default settings that Revit proliferates out into the world, are going to be crucial, right? You've got to duplicate it because if you don't, that setting will get changed for everything throughout. And so you've got to pay really close attention to how it is that you make new wall types. And the easiest way to do it is just to hit the Duplicate tab. So this one we're going to call Type 2 8-inch CMU. I'll put a little dash in there. And then that doesn't actually do anything. That just defines the new wall type. Now we actually need to go into the structure of the wall type and adjust it. So you can see by default, it's actually made out of 8-inch CMU, nominal thickness 7 5/8. All of this is actually perfectly correct. So we can hit OK. All we really did was change the name. But now we're going to go ahead and do type 11A, which is the 6-inch metal stud with 5/8 jib. So I'm going to grab this 4 7/8 partition, which is basically a 4-inch metal stud, 3.5-inch nominal, with 5/8 jib. And I'm gonna again hit Edit Type. Gonna hit Edit Type right there, and come over here to Duplicate. Once again, always duplicate. So this is going to be Type 11-6-inch MTL stud with 5/8-inch chipboard, GWB. Again, just changing the name doesn't actually change anything about the wall type. You have to hit Edit under the structure. Here we see a more typical kind of structure. So this already has 5/8-inch jib on each side. Literally, you're looking at a spreadsheet that demonstrates what the wall is made out of. Including where the structure is located. So these core boundary types are just defining how things are going to wrap. So if a material hits a corner, is it going to wrap the metal stud all the way out to the corner? No, it's just going to wrap the jib. So this is going to indicate how the wall should fillet when it gets to a corner condition. So the only thing we're going to change here is we're changing this structure to a 6-inch metal stud. I'm just going to put 6 inches in there and hit OK. You can see the new width for this wall is 7 1/4, just as Charles had specified for us all. And now we are perfectly good to start drawing. So first things first, you can notice that there are some other wall types as we get here near the bathrooms and so forth. We're not going to deal with that just yet. We're just going to deal with these interior conditions so you can get a sense of how to start drawing. And again, everything needs to be based off of these grid lines, not the drawing itself. The drawing itself is going to have inaccuracies. So I'm drawing with this basic wall type, type 11, and I'm using the center line. You can see how the grid is actually moving through the center line. I'm going to have to kind of guess here at first about the starting point in this direction, and I'll have to adjust for this wall later on. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing. I'm just clicking once there. And the thing to notice here is that this wall depth is, let's see, I missed it. There's another dimension over here. It's 13 feet 4 inches up to there, and then this little niche is 2 feet deep. So the actual wall length is 11 feet 4 inches. I'm going to type that in, 11 feet 4 inches. You can see how it'll continue to draw if you want it to. Really what we want to do is draw one office setup here and then continue to, and then copy it across the rest of the drawing. So the next thing that I want to do is to define this wall, which you can see is 8 feet. It's using wall type 2. It's 8 feet wide from the inside of each of the walls. So I'm going to switch over this location line, and I'm going to switch the type of wall that I'm drawing with over to my type 2 8-inch CMU. And I'm going to switch this over so that it's using the finished face exterior of the wall. And the first thing I need to do is just go ahead and draw this wall type. And at first here, when I start drawing, you can see how it's facing inwards towards the office. If I hit the space bar while I'm drawing, it's going to toggle this wall back and forth. And I can go ahead and draw it to be 8 feet and then hit escape to finish it. It's not necessarily centered right now on this line. What I need to do is actually use this align dimension tool to create a set of dimensions. There you can see it's not centered. So what I used was the align dimension tool, and I selected the edge of the wall that I drew. Again, the size of the wall doesn't matter. And then I select that core or that grid line, and I'm going to select the outside of the wall. And you can see I was off by an inch. What I'm concerned with is this EQ sign up here, which when I click it will create an equal constraint on this wall. And if I hit the 2 locks, it's now actually fixed to be equal based on this original center line of the wall. And that's going to give me the constraints I need to actually make sure the wall stays the same. You can see what it did is it actually made the wall too long. So I need to go in here and change it back to 8 feet. I need to remove the constraints until I hit the dimension. So I'm going to remove that constraint with the locks on it in order to get the 8-foot distance that I need. So now we're going to continue drawing with walls, and I'm going to use this 8-inch CMU wall again. Start down here. Again, I can hit the space bar to flip it over. This chunk is going to be 2'8", so the little alcove right here is 2 feet deep. So I'm going to just draw it to 2'8", and again come all the way across. You can see here this one is 10 foot, so I could actually type that in 10 feet, and then back down 2'8", and it snaps. Hit escape to finish it. So now I've got most of that front wall of the office. I'm still missing this other chunk that's out of type 11A, so I'm going to grab that type 11 wall type again and snap it here to the midpoint of this 10-foot wall. I'm relatively confident that all my dimensions are good now based on this grid line. And I'm gonna, you can see how Revit automatically references the distance of that other wall. But I also know if I zoom out and kind of look over here, the depth of a given office is 13 feet 4 inches. So I want to make sure that that wall is 13 feet 4. Which is a little bit shorter, and so therefore I'm going to go ahead and adjust the length of this wall, and I can grab the little blue dot here, and that'll snap it up to match up with the other wall. And again, it's not always going to line up with the drawing at the bottom. Up here, I can continue drawing, or I can find a repetitious piece that I may want to copy in order to continue going. So what I think might be smart would be to start with the square here, which would be there. So I'm missing one more little wall piece here before I've got enough to start copying all of these pieces across. So I'm going to come in. I can actually grab this one if I want and mirror it across on the grid line to get it to match. And now I should have everything I need to continue to actually create a copy of all this and start copying it across. So I'm holding the Control key. I'm going to hit Control C and Control V. And make a copy. Now I can adjust it back over to get it to snap. Oops. Here we go up. To get it to snap across. So I could continue arraying that, or I could continue copying it. The last bit that we're missing here is this wall type 2 that goes all the way across, that I can draw as one big kind of wall piece. Again, I'm using the finish face exterior instead of a center line, and this is going to go all the way across until I get approximately to there, and I can adjust this end once I get there. So it looks like I missed a little bit with this last piece of the copy that I did. So I'm going to hold Control and select all these, and I'm just going to use the arrow keys to actually get them to engage where they should with the outside wall or the salon wall. We're going to come back and adjust that salon wall, which has quite a bit more detail. So do the grid lines, use the two drawings, and go ahead and draw in the two sets of offices here. You can see once you get the left set of offices in over here where well, I guess you don't really have any faculty in those offices anymore. Those are mostly like staff. Anyway, those offices can be mirrored across using the number 10 line there onto the other side over near the Fab Lab as you go across. So get all those offices modeled using wall type 2, wall type 11A, and model them across, and then we'll do some doors over the weekend. All right, good luck.